The defining questions of our age are: who will have access to superintelligence and what will we direct it towards? And will it be centralized and restricted to a few institutions, or will it be a tool that empowers everyone? We propose a philosophy based on individual empowerment as a source of prosperity, invention as a primary purpose of its superintelligence, and balance of power as a foundation of safety. Matt, that's not me talking. That's Mark Zuckerberg from his latest AI manifesto entitled The Future is for Everyone.
Mark Zuckerberg, I think, is actually leading the zeitgeist again with 2 new model releases that are very exciting for a couple different reasons, very different than what anybody else is doing. And then he's also published this essay that I think is a really strong counter to Dario and to a lesser extent Sam Altman and their strategies. So why don't you break it down for us?
Yeah, so let's jump into it. First of all, I do like the fact that we're exploring these topics via long form rather than short form, but it is what you would expect on the surface from Zuckerberg. Unless you've been under a rock for the last little while, you know that Meta's approach to AI has been erratic, and he's trying to grasp onto a position for the business around AI. And I think that is pretty clear now that he's positioning Meta as the champion of open source AI. And his main thesis or hypothesis is we used to have democratic access to AI up until, 2 months ago. And now that is not necessarily the case, that we'll all have equal access to it. And his thesis is that in order to successfully manage the introduction of AI into society in a way that doesn't destroy everything, you need a balance of power. Meaning we all need access. And if we have that access, then there will be this natural balance of power that happens, of course, in society, right? When we have differing levels of opinion, we all have a voice in a democracy, and we can decide what's the best thing for our community. AI is no different, in the sense that we all need access. And the best way to get that is not to have to pay Sam Altman or Dario Amodei for access. And hopefully we're the right type of people to get access. Are we an enterprise? Are we a corporation? Are we a powerful individual? No, we can all download the latest AI from Facebook and use it ourselves.
Yeah, I think that's definitely, what a lot of corporate leaders want to hear right now. And there's a lot to break down, but I think Mark Zuckerberg has done a very good job this week. It's very well done because it is a also ran letter, but he's also released some very interesting models that make this look much more like a strategy rather than lashing out against the winners, right? And so he released Muse Glimmer, which is an on-device or locally hosted. You could put it on your laptop with some level of intelligence. If you had the benchmarks of exactly kind of like the parallels, to, is it like a 4.0 or a 4.5, whatever the other model we could compare it to in terms of performance. But then he also released his 3rd iteration of Muse Spark. Muse Spark 1 was released in April, and then 1.1 in July, and 1.2 in the last week. And 1.2, they're going to release open weight. And that means that once the weights are out there, it's not necessarily something that you could put on your laptop. It's far too many parameters to fit in your memory and to run. But if you happen to own a data center and you have this open weight model, you can use it. And so there's a lot to break down in terms of his vision of how companies will procure AI and how much it will cost that you've hit on. And then he also, I think, is positioning himself to be more aligned politically. He talked about a few things, and we can break them down in serial. One, he talked about jobs, not just democracy, but then also how is this going to affect people's jobs? And I thought his framing here was really good. We can come to that. He talked about data centers. He talked about competition. And then also I'd like to touch on the fact that this is an open weight model that he's proposing, that it's not Chinese. And so this is very well positioned in the current moment to hit a lot of the notes that Dario and Sam are not hitting.
Yeah, so let's go back to the job one, which I also found really interesting. And I don't know if you sort of absorbed the framing the same way as I did, but the question is AI going to steal all our jobs. I don't know how many times we've said this on the podcast, but he framed it as a question of, is this invention or is it automation? Which is going to win out? And the idea being automation is AI is coming along, it's going to automate our jobs and we're toast. Invention, creativity, novelty, doing new things. And is AI going to empower us to build lots more new things quicker than it automates the old things, essentially, which I thought was a very clean way of framing the conversation.
Just perfect. I mean, honestly, the simplicity of it is innovation going to create more things for us to do faster than automation takes away the things? That's the question. And Zuckerberg is committed to making sure that innovation goes faster than automation so that we all have something to do. Perfect. That's easy. It's not a matter of like, well, Jevons paradox and blah, blah, blah. And things that are maybe like, that's how I might think about it. And he just came through, cut the noise and say, look, innovation is going to win. Are we going to create new things to do? And this is a guy who owns Instagram and has created lots of new types of ways of making a living. I sat next to an influencer once on a plane. I was just like, you get someone that's like a vibe and you're like, this is an interesting person. And she was just in there editing videos and responding to marketing. I'm kind of like peeking over at her laptop. And he has a track record of creating these new things. And he talked about WhatsApp and keeping it all encrypted and things like that. That's a lot better than, Trump and Sam Altman, deciding who gets which model and then being able to read all your messages and steal your corporate information. So, I think he had a lot of credibility in addition to being very clear.
Well, and the credibility comes obviously from his own experience and his own history and his own successes. But let's just jump into Muse Glimmer for a second. So Muse Glimmer is
This is the one you're most excited about.
Yeah, it is, because this is here's what the promise is. You don't have to go to Sam Altman and pay API fees or have a ChatGPT account. You download this, essentially a piece of software, and you have an AI that you can use in a familiar way. Uh-huh. The question is, it's all that they've been around for a while, right? Maybe you've heard of Qwen out of China. Mm-hmm. So these are not new. They're generally not very good, or they haven't been very good. But it's pretty apparent to me that it's ChatGPT circa 12 months ago in terms of how good it is. Now, that's pretty damn good for a small piece of software that you could put on your laptop. So imagine if you're a company with an IT department, right? You can hook up a couple of servers and you can you'll be able to run Spark, which is a new one, which is going to be open source. They haven't said exactly when, but in the near future. So I think we're now in the realm where we have credible local models that are within spitting distance of being really, really quite usable. Mm-hmm. And so back to the question of credibility, we really are in a world now where automation has been the easiest thing to do, because we know, we've got a process here, let's automate it. We've got an application we can get access to and we can go do it. There's cost challenges with all of that type of stuff. We're now, as I said, within spitting distance of having a piece of software that we get for free, put it on our piece of software, use it privately, locally, to do the things that we want to do, and at zero cost other than the compute cost. Mm-hmm. So that it's hard to really articulate how powerful that's going to be for so many different people. And so there's a real chance, I think, now that invention could overtake automation.
Yeah, I just my brother called me today. And if you know my brother, he was just so excited because he was like, look, I was at a club. It was like a members only club, and he goes with his buddy, and you just let yourself in. But it was like they had a code, and he was like, could I help them, build a membership app? And he's like, how much would that cost? And I'm like, I don't know, like $100. Like go get Cloud Code, man, go get it. And so it's like I've been and my brother. I mean, like if you don't know my brother, he's like just a gruff guy, and he's inspired by it. It was really awesome, and it was a lot of my clients are people who were not traditionally in technology, who are thinking about how do I make my business better. and they're excited. I think the most important aspect of my customer base right now is this fun? Like that, I've actually gotten feedback. Like we were crushing a certain project, and the client, we're helping this client build an app and manage it and things like that. And but it wasn't fun, right? And it's like to see people get excited about being part of innovation. That's like probably the most positive thing I've seen about AI is people raising their expectations, getting inspired. People who wouldn't traditionally have access to this, who didn't have access to $1 million in funding or 10 engineers, can go and build stuff and even validate it to the point where maybe they could go raise some money if that was what was necessary, or bootstrap it. So I think that innovation is real. It's probably incumbent on people that would like AI to succeed to put a finer tip on that and have more examples. But again, Mark Zuckerberg does have a lot of credibility here because, I mean, he has created a lot.
Mm-hmm. I love it. I'll jump to the next one that caught my attention. Idea of community compacts.
Yeah.
The AI industry is consumptive. Water, energy, a bunch of other things. And what I loved about, so just no big surprise. I think it was easy for him to point to the fingers at his competitors and say, you guys are building data centers and you're just going in to build the data centers and you don't care about the communities, et cetera, et cetera. Well, Mark Zuckerberg doesn't care about the communities either, except that he's smart enough to realize that you can't be myopic. You can't go in there with a laser and just do the things that you want, extract the value you want out of communities, real places, and walk away. So he put a nice name on it, community compacts. And it's this idea of, well, look, if we're going in there, what other parts of the community and the ecosystem need to be rewarded and partake in the value that's being created. So he talked about bonusing teachers and all different. You can imagine different ways of doing it, and it actually rang a bell for me. There's a very, very famous business in Oakland called Kaiser Healthcare, or founded in Oakland, called Kaiser Healthcare. And it's one of many sort of, this idea of company towns. Walmart, I think, is like that as well in Bentonville, right? Where you see all boats, rise with the tide sort of idea, where you actually need to share that reward amongst the community. Now, again, I don't believe Zuckerberg wants to do this. I think he realizes he has to do this. And if he can make that table stakes, I think it's going to move AI away slightly, at least locally, from being the most hated technology ever to being something that potentially has silver lining for communities. And there isn't this like, hey, listen, no data centers anywhere near us.
Yeah, my opinion on this is that there's no pleasing NIMBYs, right? And these aren't even NIMBYs, because there's a lot of these people who don't want data centers built anywhere. And anything you do to please them is essentially a form of Danegeld, where like the concept of Danegeld is that when England started to be attacked, the Anglo-Saxons before the French arrived, right? So Geld is, I think, a German word, right?
German. Yeah.
And some people would just pay them off. Like they would come over, Vikings would come over their boat. They would say, hey, instead of killing everybody in this abbey, how about we give you some gold and it's worth your time, please leave. But the problem is, the next summer, all the surrounding villages, heard the bragging of these. Hey, we just got on a boat, went over, loaded it with gold, and came back. It was the best thing ever. Well, guess what happened the next year, right? Anyway, so that's the concept of Danegeld. It's like it might make your problem go away right now by paying people off, but then they're all going to see that, well, if that worked, I should try twice as hard next time. And so you're not actually creating a new equilibrium where data centers are being built in the optimal locations, just with some amount of cost. What you're doing is you're creating a political constituency who has no interest in your data center ever being profitable. They're just going to take as much as they can from you, and they have, no vested interest, right? So I think it's much more important to do the kind of things like OpenAI has started doing, where they're investing in, math breakthroughs, cancer breakthroughs. Google just closed AlphaFold. And Demi, that was one of the big things that happened, actually. Demi Hassabis, he left, the founder of DeepMind. Jeff Dean, one of the founders of Google Brain, he left, and he's like, Jeff Dean's been there for 30 years or something like that. And so it's like, And both of them left, I think, because Google has become less charitable. And so, this image of, well, if it doesn't make money for Google to invest in protein folding and cancer solving, and they're going to stop doing that. And OpenAI, well, they'll do a little math, but they spent like what they said, $2,000. It's like, okay, that's not so much. Maybe that's not the thing. It's not going to be, look, we're doing AI and therefore we're going to solve cancer. But I think one of the reasons social media has kind of, despite all of its downsides, has actually gone so far is that it did create people's jobs. It created something that people actually themselves benefited from. And again, I think that's where they should lean in. The payoff stuff, it's...
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting that there's another type of geld, by the way, Trinkgeld. That's another one we need to talk about. That's drink money, but that's for another podcast. Yeah, I think the example I gave maybe wasn't the best example, but the point is really it's about creating more jobs, right? Making sure that the community locally is rewarded for it, and it's about finding this the equilibrium that is necessary to be successful in terms of building the data centers. But let's move on.
It's a real shame that we have so many self-imposed headwinds that we've imposed on the economy at this moment, because I actually think that we're actually creating more jobs, and that eliminating the things that it makes the most sense to eliminate. And I'm going to do a bad job because Mark Zuckerberg just said it easily. Innovation grows faster than automation. Duh. And then in my mind, I'm like, but actually what's really happening is the bottlenecks in the economy are the most valuable things to solve with AI. The most effort is being put in there to solve them. And therefore, if you take a business that could be 3 times bigger, except for this bottleneck, and then suddenly you solve that bottleneck, the business gets 3 times bigger. People want more trucks. They want bigger houses. They want more experiences, right? And suddenly the overall capacity of the overall economy to provide those things grows. And then even though there's kind of an inflation because people are consuming more, the fact that you're so much more productive keeps the prices of all of these things stable, which is really what we're indexing. And so what happens is the economy gets bigger, prices stay stable, people have more consumption, right? Like that's what I want people to think. Like that's how I would think about it. You could call that innovation happening faster than automation, but I think that's a very particular way of looking at it. Mark Zuckerberg is much better, by the way, perhaps less realistic. My point is you need to actually, in the midterm, start focusing on revealing the benefits of AI and not just think, well, how do we make data centers palatable? Oh, look at all the electrician jobs. And there are real electrician jobs, and water, I guess, could be self-cycle. It's like, it's used so little water compared to like alfalfa, like who gives a shit? But like, okay, yeah, like address it. Sure. My point is do something that actually makes people's life better, where they're like, I love AI. It makes my life better. You and I work with AI all the time. I don't know if AI has made my life better yet. I know that I have to engage with AI or I'm going to be crushed. And then perhaps at some point I'll be like, man, AI has made my life better. I love playing with it. That's actually fun. But most people, again, have not gotten to that level of engagement yet. I think all the effort should be focused.
That's a really good point.
And the initial efforts by Zuckerberg to make AI and Facebook have been terrible. If you remember the stupid, apps and stuff they built, the video apps and stuff like that they inserted, they were just bad. So I think it's like you really do have to just mass produce something that people actually recognize as, I love AI and that's good for me.
That's a little tangent for a second. So I was sort of summing up your last point as AI has a PR problem, but that's not actually the issue. AI has a killer app problem in the sense of we can't all look and point at something either individually or collectively and say, yeah, but we wouldn't have that with AI. How bad would life be if we didn't have that?
Yeah, and so and the thing is, even if you cured cancer, most people don't have cancer. Like you're still going to have pushback. Like you look at the vaccine they created for COVID, right? That cure, in pretty short order, people hate it.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a political loser. I mean, like I'm not saying that's good or bad or whatever. It's a fact that if you cured cancer, people would still hate AI if it meant that they would lose their job. We're really not going to have public adoption until it makes people's personal worries they have. If they're not thinking AI is going to make me less worried, I'm not going to worry about my job. I'm not going to worry about my well-being. And we haven't seen anything like that where it never makes someone feel secure in their social position and their psychological safety, like Maslow's hierarchy. People are going to be kicked out of their houses because they lost their job. And like, if you don't have an answer to that, like nothing else in this essay is going to matter.
Yeah. Okay. What else caught your attention in it?
I think the open weights, the last thing I want to say about the open weights is that China has been up to now the only provider of near leading edge open weights, right? Something in the range of like 6 months ago, right? If you remember, Opus 5 came out. Opus 5 was July. Okay, so this was a month and a half ago. So you know, this open weights model that's almost as good as Opus 5, which just came out. Like that's the fact that people can use that instead of Chinese weights is very important. It's maybe 6 months off the leading edge. That means that there's no ability for the government to take it away if it is released as open weights. Inference for these models, the Chinese models in particular, is a tiny fraction of what you have to pay to use the Anthropic and OpenAI APIs.
Because you're providing the inference compute?
Well, they're actually, I think Anthropic has been reported that they're almost profitable because their inference costs, despite how much money goes into research, like these companies have insane research expenses, and despite that, they're still profitable. And so the Chinese are finding these, and so when you actually do inference on the open models, it's a small fraction. And so there's a lot of people who are really want to run the models themselves because of the dependability, the fact that your data is not being exported to anyone else, but also the lower inference costs. Because now, I mean, just like NVIDIA has like 80, 90% gross margins on some of their products, if you could have another chip, oh my God, like it just, when people were experimenting and it was a few people using a few $1,000s a month to AI, but now if you're spending like, you know, Facebook was spending $1 billion with Anthropic, well, it's like, oh, I'd love to have a very near capability model that where the inference would cost me 10 million instead of $1 billion.
This gets into the economics and the market dynamics, which is really interesting. This is becoming a credible threat to the valuation of OpenAI and Anthropic. Or let me restate that.
Yeah, possibly.
It's likely, or it's possible now that will happen. There's one challenge though that Zuckerberg brought up, which is this process of distillation, right? And I'm not going to pretend to understand exactly how it works, but conceptually it's this idea of you observing another model and being able to deduce how it works and just sort of copy and paste that into your own, rather than having to do the really expensive process of actually training the model. So it's a way for models to learn from each other, and it's much, much more cost effective. And my recollection is that we've seen missives from both Anthropic and OpenAI saying we should ban distillation.
Yes.
Zuckerberg is saying, no, we need to have distillation.
Yeah, I think this has several different levers. Number one, Anthropic ruthlessly stole all the IP they could to train their models. And it was very much a ask for forgiveness, don't ask for permission situation. And they paid like $1 billion or $2 billion to book owners, which is just one of the things they've rated to get their data. And so let's not imagine when they're like, well, it's not right to steal our work. It's like, no, you stole humanity's, and there's even this story where they were taking rare books, like in particular books with one copy, scanning them and then shredding them so that, because a judge once ruled that if there's only one copy left, then copyright doesn't apply. And so there's, I mean, just like stuff like that. It's just like, well, I don't know if that, maybe I'm falling prey to the, AI data center water usage type scams. But like, my point is, they stole a lot of stuff. They stole it from everybody. They searched the whole web. They ignored robot.txt. They stole everything they could. And they said, well, our job is to make an AI. And once we do that, we'll be forgiven. And yeah, now they're worth $1 trillion and they paid $2 billion. Okay. So I think with that off the table, distillation is not a moral issue. Now, is it a security issue? Is probably a better leg, which is one that Sam Altman and Dario also talk about, which is if the Chinese are distilling mythos. And when you got to imagine all the hubbub about mythos and how powerful and dangerous it was, the recent news that like we hacked Hugging Face. Well, in some sense, what does that do? It makes it more likely that the government would say, it's really important that we clamp down on any type of distillation lest the Chinese get these amazing capabilities, which are like, internet security's always been bad. Fix the bugs. Don't bottle up the models. And that's Mark Zuckerberg's point. Is like the best way to do this is give the government open access, put effort into fixing the bugs. Don't just say like we shouldn't have powerful AI that everyone can use because, somebody's SQL hasn't been updated. No, constantly scan everything on the internet at all times, which guess what? AI is really good to do. Fix everything as quickly as possible. And there'll still be security holes as there's always been. But the fact that like Minnesota's water is getting hacked is much more a statement about why don't we just fix Minnesota's security versus like we need to, have like this very hard to enforce
which is a sporting
where,
argument for the balance of power idea that democratize access for it.
Yeah, and I think that's very much what Mark Zuckerberg is like. No, you should have lots and lots of competing things. I don't think Mark Zuckerberg has a very coherent idea of, economic and cultural like equilibrium and stuff.
But to wrap this one up in a bow from my perspective, Zuckerberg's doing a couple of things. I think it's a little bit of a PR exercise, but he's articulated cogent, credible strategy, which is backed by some real product, right? That he's delivered, and it's probably the first real opening salvo, I think, in a really interesting battle between your closed wall, closed garden guys, OpenAI and Anthropic, and US open source models. So he's both managed to compete against China and relax. You talk about psychological safety. Hey, everybody. Open source models, but it's US. Don't worry about the Chinese guys. So we're battling against those guys. And by the way, don't worry about those horrible for-profit guys over here who, won't give you access to everything unless you can afford to pay it. I'm your savior. Here you go. And then I think the third benefit, just to wrap it up, is there's a bunch of headwinds rather for these IPOs that are upcoming. Like if you're Dario, you're sitting there going, wait, Trump might be able to stop me at any point when I want to release my cool new thing to make me more money. And by the way, this guy over here, who's got a, pretty good history of being successful and he's got the resources, can, copy me and completely undermine my price point and my margin.
Possibly. And let's be clear. Muse Spark 1.2, like the names just keep expanding. Muse Spark 1.2, which is a replacement for Llama, which they're dropping because it had like some terrible releases. So now it's Muse. And it's way behind Fable. There were projects that I was super excited about. I got bored working on with Opus 4.8 because it was just like, God damn, you're so dumb. Shut up. Like, stop doing that terrible, stupid thing. Fable came out, just crushed them. Much more credible, much fewer errors. So let's not imagine that just because they're close to the leading edge, I will pay much more money for Fable than using, like, you remember the days when Fable actually got pulled back
but I got to stop you there for a second because there's a bunch of in-production AI that is in bounded situations that doesn't require the level of intelligence that you and I are playing with to build the latest thing.
Enterprise diffusion is still extraordinarily low. We have not, in general, found AI that performs well enough. I don't think there are very many problems where we say, look, if we had a Haiku 4.5 level AI, it does this perfectly every time. I think there are going to be situations like that. There's a lot of situations that are just solved by plain software too. And I think the new equilibrium very well might. And like we help a lot of people build applications with AI. And more, the way that the application shows up is, hey, let's use an MCP so that the user can access this with Fable. And that's way better. And so it's like, I agree that it's going to happen what you say, but I don't know if it's going to be the norm that AI will be good enough ever. I think we're going to reach a very quickly changing way of the world being structured where high-end AI might actually be very crucial to a lot of things. And there might always be gains to just being 6 months ahead of everybody else. Do you use an iPhone 8? Like, of course not. Although it would work, it would be actually probably better for you mentally to have a tiny phone with shitty, you couldn't watch video very well on it, has low resolution. But of course, no one does that. Everybody uses the latest phone if they can afford it. So it is a proposition I would at least be humble in our ability to predict.
Agreed. All right. What else? What else did we not cover here?
Well, I think we've dwelled enough on Zuckerberg. We probably won't come back to Zuckerberg for many months, but good job, Zuck.
Good summary, Matt. Any final parting comments? I think we went pretty deep on it.
Done enough. If anybody is still listening to this episode, we have many other episodes on YouTube. Thank you for listening.
All right. Well, thank you, Matt. We'll see you next week.
See you next weekend.